very warm welcome to Brooklands Museum on this cold and rather damp February day. My name is John Bottomley and I've been around Brooklands for about the last 20 years with the motorcycle team. As a museum, we're very fortunate in the fact that we have a number of historic and iconic motorcycles which are part of the heritage of Brooklands. And furthermore, we have the sons of the original owners of these machines who actually rode them and raced them here. Unfortunately, the original owners are not around, but what I'm trying to do is make a number of short films of their sons' recollections to try and record the heritage of what was Brooklands in its heyday. So I'm joined today by Graeme Brown, who's the son of Graeme Brown of Douglas Motorcycling fame. Thanks for coming today, and also a big thank you for keeping both the sidecar and the race bike in the museum, because we have here two machines. We have the sidecar, which is
that's Dad's bike. He kept going most of his Douglas career.
Okay, and then we also have here your father's race bike.
Yeah, built in 1926 to race at Brooklands, nowhere else, in 1927. So it started racing in 1927. Very few people ever rode it. There were only ever 3 made. 2 of them are still in existence. One is in a museum in Middlesex, the other one is here, and one disappeared. But this, as far as we know, is absolutely original from the last time it raced at Brooklands. Nothing's been changed apart from the tyres and the air in the wheels. Other than that, everything's exactly as it had its last race. So I'm very proud of Dad for what he did. He sold Douglas spares, genuine Douglas spares, for over 75 years worldwide, which is quite credible. I don't know anybody else will beat that for records, but sadly, unfortunately, Dad is gone now.
So I think, if I remember correctly, your father was born in 1903.
Correct.
And what got him into motorbikes, do you think? Because he would sort of live as a child through the First World War.
I think it was a schoolboy thing. Grandfather had nothing to do with motor of any description. I know if grandfather went out in the car, father had to follow him on the motorbike behind in case the car broke down. So, and things like that. But what got him into it, I don't know. But he was lucky that the garage at Great George Street, Godalming, came on the market. Grandfather bought it to him and he set up business 1923.
Right. And
he sold Douglas stuff for the rest of his life and was actually still sending spares all around the world within a week of his death. So he's 100% Douglas.
So some connection which you're not clear about got him into Douglas, which I understand that he was a Douglas man. Yeah. So he set up the garage and was selling Douglas motorcycles.
Yes.
In the area, so he's a distributor, etc.
Correct.
Of Douglas motorcycles, and presumably doing repairs and.
Yes, they had repairs. They had a shop in the high street and they had a garage just round the corner separately. Right opposite, they had a store for petrol, because in those days, petrol was only ever sold in 2-gallon cans.
Correct.
So they had to have a separate petrol store.
So this is the 1920s.
And that's the 1920s.
So somehow or other, he got the bug to come to Brooklands, presumably.
I don't know what actually got him into Brooklands, but he did start racing at Brooklands, and that became his interest. Then he became a works rider. Hence Douglas supported him, and from there to that, it progressed to this was the last racing bike that Douglas made that raced at Brooklands.
Right. So that gets us through the 30s when he does appear on various results, etc. And I know we have in the museum a number of his cups that he actually won.
Yes.
Here. Does he have a gold star or not?
No.
No. Because I think the bike was sort of before the 100-mile-an-hour laps. I know I've seen results of him doing 85, 90 mile an hour.
Yes, they used to do the 100 mile check, because
yeah.
there is a tank, bigger tank for
Yes.
doing 100-mile race here.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Was raced here by Graeme Brown in that year. And the rider on it, in fact, is Graeme Brown, who is now well into his 80s and still uses this machine quite regularly.
Now we have his brother.
Malcolm, we have managed to find a copy of the original 1987 film of the 20th Brooklands reunion organised by the Brooklands Society, which features GD Brown and obviously his Douglas. You will see the usual frenzied activity in the paddock, with riders trying to start and warm up the bikes ready for the start of activities. It is a feature of any event with pre-war bikes. They all have their unique characteristics and can be problematic at the best of times. Graeme is looking quite relaxed before it is his turn to take to the track. He didn't have a pair of leathers at the time, but such was his stature at the track. The organisers were happy to let him ride in his brown shoes with his trousers tucked into his socks, and this has been a feature of his post-war riding attire. These were the days before the paranoia of health and safety had taken over. GD on his timed run down the old runway at the track. It was too short for fully equipped planes to take off, so they were flown out part finished to the Filton for final finishing. It was ideal for sprinting bikes and cars. The second part of the event was untimed runs around the members' banking. You can see here GD ready for his run. Finally, Martin interviewing GD. Unfortunately, the sound is not wonderful, but at least there are a few words that you can make out.
Right, when you raced it here, Graeme, what sort of races did you win with it? And
well, not all on this one.
yeah,
I won the A6 Cup.
yeah.
I won the Joe President's Cup.
This is the only one of your races that survives. This is the only one of your races that survives.
That's the only one. Yeah, all the others went back.
A fine machine, Graeme. It is. It is. It's the only one of its kind left, isn't it, Graeme?
Yeah, there were 4 of them made.
Yes.
Line 3 of them. And the spare one was in an experimental shop and it's taken a bit. One that was then at the Uni Museum.
Yes.
Then by William Douglas Bristol, written by Rex Dad, 1936. Went in a year or two ago, it disappeared. Nobody saw where it was.
Oh dear.
That's existence so long.
Yeah.
I first read it in 1924.
So, a good racing career. Yeah.
I'm enjoying it.
Well, that's the main thing,
All the
Graeme.
time I can ride it now.
So we've talked about the jewel in the crown, and maybe we should go and talk about the Workhorse, which is equally interesting, because this was the way that the race bike was transported to Brooklands for all of his
and it was always used as a breakdown collector. If anybody broke down, it was used in the business for carting goods. Any motorbikes that needed transporting, it was used, and it never really gave any trouble.
And this, what year is this?
I'm not too sure what exact year of this one is. I
Mid-20s?
have to look that up. Yes, it is.
Mid-20s?
Early 20s.
Early 20s, yeah. And Of course, and I think, I don't know what you said, but Douglas went bankrupt, didn't they? And that's when your father bought up all the spares and everything.
Yes, all the spares, because that's why he was able to supply spares for so long. He bought all the stuff from the works. There was all the bikes, engines, bits and pieces, and that's what he supplied carrying on for the rest of his life.
Excellent. And the business moved from selling real motorbikes to various not so real motorbikes, in my mind, if I'm correct.
Well, Dad sort of rented some of the garage out, and he carried on as a motorcycle dealer. Then they packed up, and after that it was taken on as selling kitchen refurbishment stuff.
Oh, okay.
But so that was the end of the era of motorcycling.
But wasn't he selling Lambrettas or
Vespers?
Vespa.
Yeah. He sold Vespers because Douglas's, when they moved from the factory, they set up importing Vespers, and then they started actually building Vespers. They even cast all the engine bits and everything, and they made Vespa scooters.
Right. So he
he naturally obviously took on the Vespa scooters. So.
Right. So having said that, I'm going to pause now so he can do his bit.
Pause.
So you would end up riding this when you worked for him before you went into television as
Oh yes, I did quite a lot of miles on this. They say we used to use it for transport and everything else in those days. There weren't the cars that were built then. And
you didn't take your wife on the back, did you?
No, I never did that, no. Not that brave.
That's excellent.
No, it's probably one of the most reliable engines that Douglas ever made, the S6.
Well,
and it's had very, very little attention.
I think it's interesting to see today that it's been running today. It hasn't been used for quite a while, and we didn't have too much difficulty getting it operational for a thing.
Oh, it's about 20 years, I think, since it was last used.
Yeah. So we were making a little bit of history ourselves, really, when you look at it.
True.
Yeah. Okay. Now the other thing which has always intrigued me was that when you brought the this and the bike, the race bike in the sidecar, you rode it here. Is that right?
I did, yes. It came up from Godalming with the race bike in it, delivered to the museum here, and that's where it's been ever since.
Excellent.
Appropriately placed.
Yes. Well, we've tried to recreate that today, as people will see a little bit later on in the film. Yeah. Now, the other thing with this, which I think is always interesting, and I think this is basically true, that your father was very possessive about the bike, and nobody could really ride it. And that even though you was and I'm sure as a mad racer of the 50s and 60s, that must have been a real challenge. And anyway, what you will see later, I think that we managed to get that running properly, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But we actually managed to put you on it to realise a lifelong dream, if I can call it that.
Well, I think all the time Dad was alive and had that bike, as far as I know, only 3 people ever rode it.
Right.
And the one was including him.
Yes.
He just wouldn't let anybody else near it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I share with you, because I knew your dad, but I knew him because of the involvement with Witley Motor Club, where he was president.
Yes.
And I used to ride off-road events and the Boxing Day Scramble and all this sort of thing. And there was this lovely man, J.D. Brown, with his Union Jack, who used to start all the events, and so I got to know him, as an official. And when I came here 20 years ago, of course, I realised that this man that used to set off all these events for Witley Motor Club was the one and only J.D. Brown.
Small world.
It's a small world, and there was the other friend of his who was a guy called Reg May, who used to tell me the story that Reg reckons that he rode a penny farthing bike down Guildford High Street.
He did indeed, yes, because his father-in-law actually made penny farthings.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So that must have been one.
That was at Shelford, near
that
Guildford.
was one experience. Yeah. Okay. So what else can we add into this? I think we've covered most of the brief history. of the two events. And there's other people who have come on the scene, because one of the things that I've got is some of the footage from the post-war Brooklands events, showing your dad riding the bike in the sprints and everything.
Oh yes, he would never miss one of those.
Yes.